And of course, we will welcome President Museveni and also President Ruto to the stage. We were just speaking about the gaps that still exist despite some of the investment that we've seen on the continent. I've been listening to both of you speak this morning, and it seems like there is more cohesion between both of your countries. I wonder if you speak to an investor and you talk about what the regional collaboration looks like now, what's different now than in the past, what would you say? President Museveni?
I think what is different is that the mistake makers have failed. So people have seen the mistakes. The mistakes have blossomed. They have seen. I think that's why people are beginning to see themselves different. You can see these are. I have been watching this for the last 65 years. I think Mr. Ruto maybe, are you 65? 58, you can imagine. 50. So, these young people have come up and they have seen. It would have been better if we, because like some of the other people, like the Chinese, the people like Lee Kuan Yew, they saw it earlier. But Africa also had a lot of additional problems. Like, for instance, landlocked countries.
Right.
If you are landlocked, even if you see something, if the coastal countries don't see it properly, you can't move. So the mistakes are our biggest teachers. Because, and the crises. The youth have no jobs. So I think people can now see, can listen more. Because there was a law. It was really ideological intoxication that if you, like for instance here in East Africa, how the East African community broke up in 1977 with Amin. People thought there was another way other than the East African community. But now later on they discovered that no, East African community is the only way, and that's how we came back.
President Ruto, have recent crises potentially accelerated some of this newfound collaboration between your countries?
Yes and no. I think the question you've asked is what is different now? And I think there is realization by all of us that the solution to the challenges and problems we have is not out there. It is right with us. If you listen from what Dangote has said, he has said investors from out there will not invest in our countries unless we take the lead ourselves. Why would somebody else take a risk? How is it their business to build our countries? It's none of their business, and I mean, rightfully so. First and foremost, we must realize that it is our responsibility. Others can only come to support us, but we must take the lead ourselves. And it doesn't start with entrepreneurs and industrialists like ALIKO here. It starts with leaders like President Museveni and myself. Because the challenge that we have in our continent is a challenge of leadership. That's it. I mean, if the leaders are not willing to lead from the front, if the leaders are not willing to make the decisions, the policy choices that will take our country forward, because some of the policy choices are not necessarily popular. It isn't easy for It is not easy for President Museveni to say, if you are not making this choice, we are not going with you. You know, banning export of minerals is not an easy thing, because there are people who make money out of selling raw materials. So you have to tell them, no, this is not the right thing to do. So some choices have to be made by leaders. So it starts with us as leaders, making the right choices. Not convenient choices, not necessarily popular choices, the right choices. That's number one. Number two, it is to stop what President Museveni was saying, petty jealousy, you know, between us. You know, I'll give you an example. President Museveni decided that he is going to invest in the pipeline in Kenya because he believes that the pipeline in Kenya is not only important for Kenya, but is also important for Uganda. When President Museveni told me, I went to him and I told him, please give us some of your iron ore for our business people here in Kenya. He told me, that is not the policy choice I want to make. I have already said nobody is going to take iron ore from Uganda unprocessed. Then I made the choice that the investors who are in Kenya, I persuaded them to go and invest in the in the plant in Uganda. You know, I was not selfish about it, because what will happen is that the iron ore in Uganda, the steel that is going to come from that iron ore is going to benefit not just Uganda, it's going to benefit Kenya as well. Instead of us importing steel from all over the world, it is cheaper for us to import steel from Uganda.
Right.
And because this is one region. So this, the beginning is the leadership that determine how we move forward. Let me conclude by saying, listening to ALIKO Dangote here, it is not just leadership at our level, it's also leadership at the level of our business people. It would have been easier for ALIKO Dangote to do trade of oil. You know, I remember speaking to President Olusegun Obasanjo, and he told me he had a meeting with ALIKO here, and ALIKO told him, if you don't change the policies here, it is easier for me to import oil cheaper, I make more money, sell, than to refine oil, unless you make the right policy decisions. And that is what ALIKO is telling us here, that the private sector and us will invest in the refinery. And by the way, we are discussing a refinery in Tanzania.
The two of you.
Yes, we are not discussing a refinery in Kenya or Uganda. We are discussing that we are going to have a joint refinery in Tanga to benefit all of us, because that refinery is going to take on board the oil from DRC, the oil from Kenya, the oil from South Sudan, the oil from Uganda, and we will just need to build a short pipeline from Tanga to Mombasa, and the finished product will use the pipeline that we already jointly own with Uganda. So all our assets become profitable. But you need a longer term view, you know, to see it than just a short term, you know, country by country. And that is why President Museveni was saying fragmentation is also part of our enemy. That is why some people broke up the East African community, because they didn't see the benefit of the bigger market. They were just looking at individual countries. So that is the where we are at the moment. And it is different because we've all learned our lessons. The policymakers, like myself and President Museveni, We can see with clarity where this should go. Industrialists like Dangote here, they too can see. And AFC right here with us, and all these other good bank people, they also appreciate that it is their responsibility to invest in this infrastructure because it makes them money and it grows their bank balance sheets as well.
Thank you, President Ruto. Samaila, I wanted you to jump in because
But Mujuku, you speak Swahili?
Not right now. Samaila, I wanted you to jump in because...
Just hold on. What is also new is that if you look at Uganda, the pool of scientists whom we have now, we didn't have them at independence. We now have people who can do anything. Automobiles, vaccines, electronics. So although we are meandering, making mistakes, but also some capacity was being built. Education, knowledge. We've got a lot of scientists. There's nothing you cannot make. So that is also new. So it is capacity there, but what he's saying, the eyes to see
the future workforce. Samaila, I wanted you to jump in. When you talk to global investors, is this regional cooperation, is that becoming a prerequisite? Because it seems like you've been speaking about this for quite some time, and it's seeming like now that we're getting government on board, this is actually starting to pick up steam and being the case for capital to actually be deployed. What are you hearing in your discussions?
Very good question. I'd like to lean in on 2 points raised. I think the key point is leadership. Leadership is extremely, extremely important to whatever we want to achieve. And I want us to look at leadership not just, from a transaction that we want to do now, but maybe from a long-term perspective. We need to embrace the idea of thinking about the next 15, 20, 30 years when we're thinking about development. So if you saw the report today, on the State of Africa Infrastructure Report, it talked about the consumption over time. It says it's going to grow significantly. And since we know that consumption is going to grow significantly, it only makes sense to look at regional infrastructure, which is what is happening here. Another point I want to make is the need for this same leadership to be applied to capital mobilization. I cannot emphasize that point enough, because ALIKO mentioned it, I mentioned it as well, and President mentioned it. He said, who pays the piper dictates the tune. Capital has always been one of those enablers for development, and we need to crack that code. And it's not so difficult. It's not so difficult because what we need to do is to look at what we have. Our research shows we have 4.4 trillion, over 600 billion with pension funds, over 400 billion with insurance funds. That's $1 trillion. And these are traditional long-term investors. So what we should be looking at is the regulation that prevents insurance companies from playing in other jurisdictions. The regulations that focus more on short-term treasury bill investments as opposed to long-term productive investments. We need to educate our trustees and gatekeepers on the need to think of the future of the workers whose funds they are managing. It is not enough to say that you're managing funds for pensioners and their children will be unemployed. That doesn't make any sense. We must have that in mind, that we must be managing holistically. So that means we must be deliberate around policy and on what will make policy work. So I come back to credit enhancements. We're just starting this journey. We're starting this journey. We need to understand that the trustees are more focused on safety and liquidity. That's their job. So we need to find a way to make them comfortable to take longer term risks. And I believe that within us in this room, the Alliance of African Multilateral Financial Institutions, the new African Financial Architecture Development that is being chaired by ADB, within this room or within this group, we can create guarantee programs that will take the initial risk from pension funds. So they're not looking at the project, they're looking at our own risks. And because we are going to develop and prepare these projects, they can be comfortable that we will not put our money in things that don't work. I say this because we need to go beyond this 100 million, 1 billion, 2 billion. We should be looking at 20, 30, 40, 50 billion for development. And for me, that is more important than any conversations that we can have with anybody. Let's focus on our needs for development. We have identified several infrastructure projects that need to be built. We have identified several refineries, fertilizer plants, all of this. They need billions of dollars. And we should be thinking about how can we use this opportunity, create those credit enhancements, create those guarantee programs that allow us to mobilize 20, 30, 40 billion dollars. I'm not interested in conversations. I mean, we have conversations, but I mean, like Alhaji Aliko mentioned, they are focused on their own objectives. Yeah. I'm focused on African objectives. I'm focused on the future of the African child. I'm focused on what future are we living. So I'm more interested in what we can do together. I'm more interested in what leadership can get done. And let's work together, make these reforms in the insurance, in the pension sectors to ensure that capital moves around.
So somewhat answered my question. A little bit of, not so much a prerequisite, but just it's a nuanced discussion that you're having with investors now. ALIKO, I wanted you to jump in because you have said that you have an ambitious goal for the Dangote Group and want to invest where there's a lack of investment on the African continent. When you look at East Africa, what are the policy commitments that you need? You say you're already in discussion. What is it that you need?
I think what we need, first of all, is consistency in government policies. That's number one. And also the support of the governments here. Because, I mean, if you look at it really, what we lack in Africa is quite a lot. Because we're a continent of imports and we're not really exporting much. We export raw materials. Which means when you export raw materials, you are exporting jobs. And when you import, you are importing poverty. Because you are creating jobs out there, not here in the continent. So I think with the support of the government, there's nothing that is impossible. And some of us were really tired of seeing our continent going out there to be begging for anything. I mean, if you remember at the beginning of the war between Ukraine and Russia, the chairman of African Union, that was President Macky Sall, had to go and be begging for fertilizers. And since that day, I said, okay, fine, by 2028, Africa will be self-sufficient in fertilizer. And while doing that, we're opening 20 blending plants in areas where they don't have the capacity. Also, we are going to be at 12 million tons of urea. We are going to have massive potash and phosphate from Congo, Brazzaville. And we believe we will satisfy most of the demands of Africa. I mean, you look at it today with population of Africa of 1.4 billion and also rising, right? We don't have raw material for detergent. Just to wash this clothes, which we need every day. We don't have. We only have 2 factories, one Egypt, 50 tons, 100 tons in Algeria. So that's why we also launched now 400,000 metric tons of linear alkaline benzene, which is the 100% raw material of detergent. So we have quite a lot, of which before we don't have the capacity. But right now, with the likes of Afrexim Bank, with the likes of Africa Finance Corporation, with a lot of support from other financial institutions, following these two, there's nothing we cannot do in Africa. That's why we, as a group, we have now launched between now and 2030, we're investing $40 billion in various fields.
Is part of that the refinery?
Even now, I can give commitment to the 2 presidents that were here. If they will support the refinery, we'll build the identical one that we have in Nigeria, 650,000 barrels.
So the discussions are still early, though, but the three of you, it seems like you're trying to make this work.
It will work. Definitely. There's nothing that can stop it. We have done the one in Nigeria, and that's why we are taking the bold move, which we have started already. Piling has started. We are building that one to a scale. 1.4 million barrels a day will give us will be the largest refinery in the world. That's number one. Number two, will have 10% of the entire United States of America's refining capacity. And this is coming with a lot of, petrochemicals. And if you look at it today in Nigeria, if not because we have polypropylene, all the businesses would have collapsed because cement is packed in polypropylene, flour, rice, grains, everything. So nothing. And the cost now has shot up between just 45 days from $900 a ton to $3,000. There's no way you can afford it. So that is why we must learn how to build self-sufficiency. Right now, we have big financial institutions that are very hungry for big ticket items. And we are also big in terms of our own vision. Before, there's nothing that, any one of us will sit down and say, no, I want to build something like, when Samaila was heading our finance long time ago, this was 2003, 2004, 2005, we were even paying 44% interest rate in Nigeria. We had to go to IFC to raise money. Was our first loan abroad was 478 million. And this thing can be done. 478 million. Samaila gave them a calculation that, okay, we need 3 years loan. They said, no, you guys, you don't know what you are talking about. You need 7 years. 2 years moratorium, 5 years payment. We said, okay, we agree because we are desperate for the money. When we took that money, we paid it back before the expiration of the moratorium, which is 18 months. 24 months, but we paid the money back in 18 months. So it is possible. Africans can do it. Let us not be scared. Let them not come and convince us that, no, somebody needs to carry our raw material to go and produce and bring the items here. I must really thank President of Uganda for taking this bold move. Stopping the export, they will be forced, they will come and produce. Why do you want to take the raw material, then you bring it back? We too, we have educated people, we have big financial institutions. It's not like before. Things have changed.
Thank you for that. I'm cognizant of time. We don't have enough time. President Ruto, yes.
I'm happy that my Minister for Minerals is here, Hassan Joho. I hope you have heard the
I see more plans.
We are not exporting anything raw going forward. And the instructions are very clear that our minerals, for the record, sit down, was it? For the record, we had Base Titanium, one of the companies, they were exporting titanium out of Kenya. They exported everything close to the mines, and we got nothing out of it. Very little, and the future generations are going to ask us, there was titanium in Kenya. What happened to it? And we will have no answers for it. And that is why, going forward, we've been very clear as a government that the rare earth that we are now looking at, all the other gold issues and the whole mineral sector, we are not going to export it raw anymore. With clarity. And that is why, as we build the refinery together, this conference is also how are we going to take charge of all the other minerals in our region that are today being exported in raw form. How do we create an ecosystem here that also creates better beneficiation of these minerals by processing it here, and driving the industries that use these minerals to come here and work with us, because in any case, and that is, allow me to say why we cannot fail. It is not possible for us to fail. Even with the refinery, it is not possible for us to fail. Why? Because we have the raw material. We have crude. Number two, we have the market to buy the product. You know, we are currently importing the products from all over the place. So we have the market to sell. Number three, we have the capital to build it, to develop it. And we have the industrialists to help us run it. Why would we fail?
That's a fair question.
Amen.
President Museveni, I'd love to hear your perspective, especially as you're getting set to be an oil producer. How do you see this changing your economy, but also how do you assure beneficiation for your economy, as President Ruto was just speaking there? And the region, excuse me.
Our strategy is already clear. We shall build the small refinery which we had planned of 60,000, that will be 180,000. Of course, this was for the internal market of Uganda and for the parts of Tanzania and parts of Kenya which are near Uganda because of the transport costs. But the surplus oil we shall contribute to the East African refinery, the one of Tanga. And as I told you, this is just from 40% of one of the 5. So we have got more oil. So when that more oil comes, we shall contribute to the refinery in Tanga more, but also must own it also. It cannot be owned by the coastal states only. It must be owned by. Regarding the other minerals, I can tell you, for instance, the uranium. We have got a lot of uranium. A Canadian company came and said, I want to take the uranium. So where are you taking it? To abroad. But I have had a rumor. What are you going to do with the uranium abroad? To generate electricity. But I have had a rumor that there are some human beings here. It's not confirmed, but I have had a rumor that there are some human beings here who need electricity. Why don't you start with those? The man disappeared. They never came back. So the uranium is in the ground. You, the grandchildren, you will get it out if we don't get it out. It's there for you. That's the same story with the gold. I banned the export of gold. Now there are how many refineries of gold now? There are now 9. Imagine this, the one we are producing in Busia, is it a kilo or what? No. The one they gave me, is it a kilo or what? Yeah, but what is it? The weight? Now, if you export gold unprocessed, 84% pure, you get $60,000 a kilo. If you process, like we have done in Busia, just on the other side of the border, you get $110,000. 160,000. 168,000. Now imagine, from 60 to 168, all that money is lost, and the jobs. And then there we are using our electricity.
Right.
You know, you the grandchildren, you must have heard of something we the elders call vertical integration.
Right.
Integrate from down up, but also horizontal.
Right.
Now, because we are purifying the gold in Uganda now, we can now also start a jewelry industry. because now the gold is pure enough to be used in jewelry, to be used in bullion,
Right.
to be used in electronics. So it is really criminal to export. I cannot allow the export of unprocessed raw materials from Uganda. I cannot.
Right. Thank you so much, President Museveni. ALIKO, please. And I think we're running out of time, but I'd love to hear from ALIKO and
yes,
Samaila.
last word. Thank you very much. Well, it's great to be here, but since we have two of our leaders here, I would like to use this opportunity to thank them for their leadership. That's number one. Number two, especially, President Ruto, to convince his colleagues to allow free movement of goods, services, and people. Because today, with an European passport, you can move faster in Africa than being an African, which I think we must really stop. So let them copy what Kenya did, because I remember I was here for his first inauguration. That was the time he allowed and removed visa-free for all Africans. Why can't we allow visa-free for all Africans? Please, we need to do that, because if we don't really do that, it will be difficult to trade with somebody that you cannot get in and out easily. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to just, Samaila, I'd love to hear from you, but I want to leave today with one commitment from everyone. We've heard a bit about what a few of you are discussing, but Samaila, maybe you start for us. What is the AFC committing today to this region moving forward?
So I would like to kind of double down on Alhaji Aliko's appeal. Free movement of people is definitely good, but I want, President Ruto, President Museveni to be advocates for the Africa we build. And I want you to be advocates in terms of the reforms that are required for us to be able to ensure that African capital resides within Africa for Africa's development. It is something that we can do. By the time we get into the round table, I would elaborate more, but it's something that requires leadership. And two of you are well placed to lead this initiative to ensure that we create African capital markets. It's very important. We will not develop if we don't create African capital markets.
Thank you.
And my commitment is to support whatever we agree, not just for today, but into the future. We are looking at what should regional integration look like in 10 years, and what are the building blocks that we must put in place today to ensure that happens. In our minds, it's not just infrastructure, it's also capital, which is why we're keen on having a conversation with all of you to ensure that happens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samaila. President Ruto, you said you want to be ambitious. What does that look like? What are you committing?
I think we are committing three things from where I sit. Number one is to continue to provide leadership at the highest level to support Africa's transformation by supporting the Africa we built.
What does that mean, though?
It means moving potential, moving ideas to projects and programs, real infrastructure projects. And in my listening to what the CEO of Africa Finance Corporation has said, is also to provide leadership at the policy level on making African capital agile, and available, so that whether it is monies we have in insurance companies, monies we have in pension funds, making sure that the capital markets work, like what we are doing at the Nairobi Securities Exchange, is for us to make it much more easy for us to use our own resources to drive our own transformation. And thirdly is to support this by getting fellow leaders in the continent to look at this perspective from where we are discussing today, so that we can get more people moving, reduce the bottlenecks and challenges that citizens, business people, entrepreneurs, industrialists come across as they cross borders, and to make sure that we take advantage of the market that we are. 1.5 billion people is a big asset, is a big resource that we can use. And finally, is to realize that by doing whatever we are doing, making sure that we industrialize our continent, we are actually tapping into the huge resource of young people that we have in our continent, because they are a potentially potent asset for us, turning them into a workforce and creating a bigger middle class out of these young people by making sure that we engage them through industrialization by creating jobs. I think this is the commitment we will make as we go forward.
Thank you so much, President Ruto. President Museveni, what is your commitment that you're leaving with today?
What is?
Your commitment that you're leaving with today on this stage.
My what?
Commitment.
Commitment. The commitment of 65 years. You see, these young people now are joining me because for 65 years, African revolution has gone through three stages. 1912, ANC is founded in South Africa. 1940s, the Mandelas come on the scene. Mandela, Nyerere, Kenyatta. 1960s, our group. And now you people, you are there. Now, our historical missions were three. We were four initially. Liberation. Number two, prosperity. How do you get prosperity? Through economic integration. I'm summarizing. The market. You cannot have prosperity without a united market. And united economic effort like we are talking about here. Historical mission number three, strategic security. To build strong armies. And that one can only be achieved through political integration. In the case of East Africa, we are talking about the East African Federation. But you don't concentrate on that, you are watching Arsenal.
I'm not watching Arsenal. I'm not watching Arsenal.
You are watching European clubs.
Right.
Now, number four is the regional of liberation. Are you from East Africa?
Yes.
You know some Swahili?
Yes.
When we were
running out of time, President, but yes, please.
When we were fighting, we were saying uhuru na umoja. Now, when we go to uhuru na uhasama. Umoja disappeared. So now it is coming back. I'm very happy to see that I lived to see these people joining me, joining Mwalimu Nyerere, joining Nkrumah, joining the Pan-Africanists.
Right. Thank you so much, President Museveni. And I'm really over time, but ALIKO, I'll give you the final word. We talk about markets, we talk about Pan-Africanism. I'm wondering if your commitment is this IPO that you are committed to. I mean, how much is deepening and strengthening African capital markets a part of your own commitment to where we're headed?
No, it's going to actually deepen the market, and we're saying that all Africans should invest and will be paying dividends in dollars. But my commitment today here is that if we agree with the 3-4 governments here about the refinery, we will lead and we'll make sure that that refinery is built within the next 4 or 5 years.
Wow, that's great. That is a positive way to end. I am so honored to be next to all of you, and thank you all so much for the time that you have spent listening to all of us, to Samaila Zubairo, the Africa Finance Corporation CEO, President William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, President Yoweri Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, and of course ALIKO Dangote, President of the Dangote Group. Please join me in thanking them all.